$500,000 sounds like a lot of money until you try to turn it into income for 25 or 30 years. This is where a lot of people get caught off guard, is understanding that there is a difference between the size of your nest egg and the amount of income it can reliably produce in retirement. In this week's video, we're going to talk about income versus assets in retirement. Let's get into it. Many people spend years and years and years focused on their savings and their savings rate. In fact, if you're a younger person watching this video, one of the best tips I could give anybody who's wanting to get started on their financial journey is to do everything you can to focus on your income earning potential and your savings rate. Because one of the things that I have found that stands the test of time is that savers tend to remain savers, meaning if you really build that savings muscle early on, it sticks with you throughout your lifetime. It could be extraordinarily difficult to go for 10 or 15 years where you're spending and you're using your money and doing all the fun things and not really saving, to all of a sudden trying to get it together, and now you need to save 20 to 25% of your income in order to meet your stated financial goals. That can be a really abrupt shift, and it's very difficult for a lot of people to do. But let's talk about how retirement is a little bit different and what you need to be thinking about as you prepare and plan for retirement, even if you are thinking of an early retirement, which has become more and more popular with younger generations. The idea of retiring earlier to maybe make work completely optional, or retire from a corporate gig and move into something that you're much more passionate about, but maybe not able to make the same level of income. We want to think about income versus assets. Many people like to focus on the size of a balance sheet or the amount of money, the actual value of the nest egg, instead of what that nest egg can be reliably counted upon to produce as far as income in retirement. I use numbers, whole numbers, like 500,000, for example. $500,000 sounds like a lot of money until you need to try to turn that into a reliable income stream for the rest of your life. So the switch that we need to make is we need to start thinking about what that money actually needs to do for us once we stop working. The better question is not, is $500,000 enough? Not, is $1 million enough? But is, how much income can my nest egg reliably produce for me and my spouse in our retirement years? For the sake of this video, let's use some very simple examples. I am not a big subscriber of the 4% rule. I think that there are some flaws to that methodology, although I do think it can be reliably used as a rule of thumb just to test out where you may be from an income standpoint or a starting point. So let's take a look at a $500,000 nest egg. And if you have $500,000 saved and we want to apply the 4% rule, meaning the first year we're going to withdraw 4% of our nest egg, well, we can reasonably think that that amount of money, we could start out with a $20,000 per year withdrawal and adjust that with inflation over time and expect that portfolio to last reasonably well through a 25 to 30 year period, barring no surprises. Well, you have to ask yourself, is $20,000 enough income to cover my income gaps or my desired lifestyle expenses? Because we have to think, if we're considering an early retirement, and when I think early retirement, I tend to think late 50s, early 60s. Some people may be wanting to retire mid 50s. Well, if you're retiring prior to the age of 62 and we don't have any extra things happening where you have other sources of income, you're not eligible for Social Security yet, you don't have any pensions, maybe no other outside sources of income, you have to start thinking, well, can that amount of money generated by my nest egg support me? At this point, we're only scratching the surface. We haven't even started to talk about sequence of return risk or how we're going to pay for healthcare bills, what we're going to do about inflation. There are lots of things. Do you have longevity in your family, for example? There are many questions that still need to be fully addressed before we can understand, does it make sense to go ahead and look at an early retirement based on the size of your nest egg? So, for instance, if we're thinking about a scenario where we've got a reasonable amount of money saved up and we're looking at maybe part-time work, now we're introducing other sources of income where the portfolio may play a supplemental role. Now you think, well, is this supplemental income going to be necessary, or will it be just one of those things that's nice to have in case I need it? Now you're opening up more flexibility and options to an actual income plan. But again, I have to give everyone here a reality check because expectations matter. One of the things that I see that happens all the time is people will put in their own assumptions or own expectations into what they want that portfolio to do. And listen, we're all human. It's very normal for us to use numbers that are likely going to show us what we want to see. But I think we have to be sober-minded about realistic expectations of what a portfolio can actually do for us over a 25 to 30 year period. Sequence of return risk early on in retirement can absolutely decimate a portfolio and make it very difficult for that account to recover, especially if it's required to give out distributions. We also have to think about inflation. We have to consider what we're going to do for healthcare. If you're planning to retire prior to age 65, where most people get eligibility for Medicare, early retirement healthcare is a real problem. A lot of people are struggling to figure out how we're going to pay for healthcare. And if you're not able to qualify for a subsidy for the current healthcare regime, then you're paying full premiums. And those premiums are quite expensive, which may require more income from your nest egg than what you need just to live. So the big thing here is not the number itself. It's whether or not the plan around how you expect to do the income is clear and flexible and sustainable throughout a 25 to 30 year retirement. The last thing I want to point out here is that one of the topics that has become quite popular online in the last couple of years is this idea of an inflection point, or a point where you've saved enough money that your portfolio is now generating more in growth from the growth of the portfolio than your actual contributions. So what do I mean by that? Let's just take a brief example here. Let's consider that you've got $250,000 saved and you're consistently adding another $25,000 per year. Right now, your savings rate as a percentage of your portfolio balance is 10%. Well, let's just pretend and assume for the sake of this example that you're going to earn 8% on your portfolio. Well, that 8% growth on $250,000 is $20,000. So you can see your savings, $25,000, is greater than the growth of $20,000. But as your nest egg continues to grow, something happens. The growth actually begins to outpace what you're saving. So now let's look at a completely different example. You have $350,000 saved. You're still saving your $25,000 with just over 7%, but now your 8% growth that we've assumed you would receive on the portfolio assets is actually greater than your savings rate. That 8% growth is now at $28,000. And so this represents an inflection point where your portfolio, your nest egg, is large enough where the compounding growth on those resources is now going to begin to outpace your savings rate. This is a great thing for a lot of people to realize because it does allow many people to take a breath and have a little bit of a sigh of relief to see their money really working for them. However, I want to put a word of caution in there for everybody that's thinking that this is now a way for us to just relax. And I hate to be the party pooper here, but one of the things that I really struggle with is when we automatically assume market performance. Market performance is not guaranteed. Yes, we have tons of historical data that backs up that the longer we can hold a portfolio, that the assets tend to perform positively over time. But I want to show you a couple quick things here. First, here is a chart that I'm going to show you where if you look at compounding growth, this is what everyone, especially my young investors, need to see. If you look at the curve, most of the real power of compounding happens towards the end. The early years are a bit of a grind because we're really trying to work and establish a savings pattern and build our nest egg and our fundamental foundation. And you'll see that the chart really goes parabolic towards the end. So the magic of compounding happens later, not early. The second thing I want to show everyone is that you do see in this second chart that growth does occur. The trend is positive, but we do have periods of time, in some instances, periods of time that could last years, possibly even a decade, where market returns are lower than average or flat. Well, if you've built your plan or you're building your retirement income plan on a straight line assumption that you're going to get 7%, 8% annually, I've even seen people use conservative numbers of 4 to 5%, but they're creating those numbers in a linear fashion where even though it's lower than historical average returns, they're consistently getting the 4%. And that's just not how markets work. Averages in markets are not the same as getting a steady 8% per year, even though mathematically it can look like that on paper. When you start distributing assets from a portfolio, volatility really matters. So we've got to be careful that we want to make sure we create a good plan that's got a good foundation, but we're also not building that plan with faulty assumptions. So yes, if you have $500,000 saved up, it's possible that that amount can actually be the doorway to you opening up a new potentially early retirement where work is optional or you begin to phase down and do some things you really love. Same thing for those who've saved $1 million. Maybe $1 million is more than enough for what you need. The key thing is to ask a better question. It's not, is this money enough? It's what kind of income can this portfolio create? And how does that work in a plan that I can sustain for the next 25 to 30 years? Hey, thanks for watching. If this resonated with you and it makes sense, please go ahead, give us a like on the video because that really helps us out with the algorithm and for people that are searching for this type of educational content on YouTube. And if you specifically are at that place in life where you're trying to figure out and put these pieces together about, have I saved enough and what kind of income will my assets create for me in retirement, then go ahead, click that link below, schedule a retirement vision call with our team today. We'd love to talk with you. And as always, thank you for watching. We'll talk to you next time.